Lawmakers don't have time for a shutdown on either side of the aisle, do they?
Well, certainly Republicans don't. I mean, I think Republicans really want to enact Donald Trump's agenda, and having the government shut down is just a huge short-term distraction for that, which is why they've effectively already conceded this fight by saying we will do a clean CR. Traditionally, conservatives hate clean CRs, especially CRs that continue the funding at Biden levels of funding. I mean, we're basically continuing Biden's fiscal policies with the CR. They've conceded that. They're like, we'll do this for another 6 weeks. The Democrats are feeling so much pressure from their base that they have to make Donald Trump fight. They have to make Donald Trump lose, suffer. And so they're coming up with these things that they want to include in the CR that Republicans are never going to agree to. Ironically, they're related to Obamacare. Yeah. I worked in the Senate when we were in the minority and Obama was president, and we shut down the government over Obamacare stuff. And I remember very vividly going into that fight saying, there is no way we win this fight. Wow. It's going to cost a lot of political capital, but our base is demanding it. So we shut down the government, and a couple weeks later, we relented. The government reopened. It was a big win for Obama. I think the Democrats are setting themselves up for a similar failure here, where they could very well shut down the government in a few weeks, making unreasonable demands on Trump. The public is not going to go along with them on this, and they'll eventually concede. The only way that doesn't happen is if the moderates in the Senate, of which there's a handful of Democrats, don't realize that this is a political loser and agree to break with Schumer and keep the government open, which I think is a real possibility.
Secretary Kennedy demanded.
The idea of extending Obamacare tax credits is something that can be handled at some point between now and the end of the year.
Right.
The CR ends Thanksgiving. Mike Johnson this morning said a policy debate at the end of December has nothing to do with a funding proposition in September.
Right.
That type of messaging might make some sense to people, but would that suggest that there is a concerted debate over Obamacare?
Oh, I think there absolutely is.
Subsidies?
I think that there are a lot of Republicans in the House and the Senate who are concerned about ending these subsidies going into,
because you know how that polls.
Of course.
It's brutal.
Like, whenever you take something away from somebody, that's going to be unpopular. And so I think that there are a lot of Republicans in both the House and the Senate. While they don't like these tax extenders, they're not really looking, or these tax credits, they're not looking to cut them going into a midterm cycle. So I think there is interest in extending them. They just really don't want to do it as part of a standalone CR. They want it to be done in the context of funding the overall government.
Got it.
So I do think that this is going to be on the table this fall. Look, whatever happens the next couple of weeks here with the government, with whether or not we shut down the government, there is going to be a big funding fight before the end of the year. And you're going to have health care drawn into it. You're going to include these Obamacare tax extenders. There's going to be a lot on the plate. And so I think this is not the fight, right? This is the fight before the fight.
So you're not scheduling the ski vacation for Christmas, it sounds like.
Yeah, look, I mean, we could very well be here on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Which it would not be unprecedented.
You've done it before, no doubt.
Exactly.
Interesting conversation with Senator Fetterman, of course, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, who's on with Brett Baer on Fox News talking about all that. Let's listen to what he said.
I absolutely fully support extending the tax credits for the ACA, but I refuse absolutely to vote for anything whether that's to shut our government down. You know, I can agree and strongly believe in something, but that it's unacceptable to hold the government, opening or closing as a hostage, and I refuse to be part of it. So that's going to be where we're at, and I've been very clear on that.
Is John Fetterman actually on the leading edge? Or will he end up being for Democrats?
Fetterman represents that moderate bloc. Now, he's obviously the most vocal and outspoken of them. But there are a handful of moderates in the Senate Democrats that are facing re-elections in the next few years that just aren't looking to shut down the government over a fight that they know that they can't win. If you've been in the Senate for a long time, you know the minority always loses these shutdown fights, especially when they're the ones making demands. Look, this is a political loser for them. I think Fetterman recognizes it. I think a lot of them recognize it, but they feel the pressure from the debate to at least show some fight. I've been there. I understand the pressure that they're feeling. And it's hard to tell your base that they're wrong, but their base is wrong.
Interesting. The conversations, I can only assume in the coming days, are going to decide this, right? You've got another week off essentially with holidays next week, and then when they come back, they'll have like 3 days to figure this out.
The Republicans are going to push forward the clean CR. It's going to pass the House. Okay. Trump might have to twist a couple of arms amongst Republicans, but it'll pass the House. They'll bring it to the Senate floor, and then we'll see if the Democrats blink or not.
Okay. There is a backdrop here of corrosion in relationships on Capitol Hill between Democrats and Republicans, just like we're seeing nationally following the shooting of Charlie Kirk. And I wonder where your head is. I think we all consider you a pretty balanced, moderate guy yourself, an old line Republican. Maybe you can check that. I know you want me to call you a conservative Republican.
Yeah.
But a conservative maybe in an older sense, if you know what I'm saying here. When it comes to Republican politics, the blame game that's going on right now is one we can all probably agree is pretty dangerous. I just wonder how it impacts policy making. There's a dual censure effort underway against Ilhan Omar right now. Maybe that takes out some of the poison on the floor, but where's the catharsis here? How do we get around it?
Look, I've been working in politics my entire adult life, worked on lots of presidential campaigns, Bush White House, the Senate, lots of presidential campaigns. And you're right. Like this did not just happen in the last week. It's not Donald Trump's fault. This is the rhetoric, the personal nature of politics has been getting exponentially worse for the last 20 years. And I don't know how it turns around. I don't know what would cause it to turn around. But clearly, last week was, just poured fuel on a fire.
Feels like a new low.
Yes, and I think for a lot of conservatives who have felt targeted, it became incredibly personal. And, I think a lot of Democrats, not all of them, I think most Democrats' response was totally appropriate, but obviously some of them weren't. And
sure.
I think they're feeling the backlash now. Where this goes, I don't know. The future is very hard to predict, but clearly it's a very toxic environment, and it does make governing harder, right? Like when both sides are have made the debate as personal as it is, it's just harder for lawmakers to craft bipartisan policy, because at the end of the day, to craft lasting policies in this country, you need bipartisan support, and that's really hard to do at this moment.
You remember the Capitol Hill shooting back in 1999, I believe it was.
Yeah.
That really shook the Capitol, shook the city. We weren't really used to. Anybody could walk in the Capitol back then. Remember, you could go to anybody's office. Didn't even need a chaperone or a badge or a credential at that point. And that was the beginning of the change. Things tightened up a lot more after 9/11.
A lot more security, yeah.
But what do we need now? Do lawmakers need details? That's what they're talking about this week.
I think that's totally appropriate.
Yeah?
I mean, I think, look, there's a lot of crazy people in this country and a lot of angry people in this country.
Yes.
And so...
would you put your candidate in an outdoor event if you were on the trail?
I know a lot of people in public life, and they're scared, right? Like the environment is very toxic right now, and so I think the minimum we can do is make sure that our public leaders are safe.
Does this require leadership on a political level to get us out of this, to get us to a different tone and a different conversation, or is it something, I guess, more bleak than that? That in 2 or 3 weeks, everybody moves on, the news cycle churns, and we're not talking about it anymore.
Well, it's a chicken and an egg argument, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think leaders reflect the public opinion. And so, look, Donald Trump was elected because that's who Republicans want as their leader.
Sure.
And you look at the sorts of Democrats that are being nominated right now in state and local elections, that's where the Democratic Party is headed as well. This is like we're getting the leaders that we voted for. And so I think it's a bit of so obviously I think, national leadership can help set the tone for environments, but at the end of the day, that national leadership is, I think, reflecting the broader public sentiment. In
the meantime, we're at the beginning of what looks like a spiral of 5-year gerrymandering here. Is the redrawing of congressional maps and the positioning we're seeing Democrats and Republicans only going to make the partisanship more extreme?
I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, ironically, what we're doing is making a lot of these districts way more competitive. You're taking very safe Democratic districts and turning them more purple, and the way you do that is by taking very safe Republican districts and turning them more purple.
Right.
Both parties here are gambling that the political environment is going to be very good for them next year.
Yeah, how true.
But if it's not, this could backlash on one of the parties. So if at the end of the day we have a lot more purple districts, that's not necessarily a bad thing.